Part 15. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 141. Calculating Marriage, Calculating Good and Bad Luck, Marrying and Marrying, Breaking the Soil when entering the house. It was already late at night, and there were fewer pedestrians on the small street, leaving only the dim light of the lanterns all over the street. Behind the fortune-telling table, the little girl with braids was sitting on a relatively high chair, her legs dangling in the air and kicking the hem of her skirt. There was still one candied hose in her hand, and she was still shouting fortune-telling chants. After shouting for a while, no guests came to the door. Xiao Dehua lowered her head and looked down, holding the silver ingot in her arms. The silver ingot was placed on the table just now, but her mother said that wealth should not be revealed, so she could only put it in her arms, but it still looked good. Little Dehua raised her little hand and touched it happily. She seemed to be energetic again and continued to shout. Calculating marriage, calculating good and bad luck, getting married, settling into a house and breaking the ground. At the stall next to it, a woman wearing a headscarf sat on the roadside. A few animal skins were sold at the stall, but there was still a lot left. Seeing that it was getting late, the woman put away the cloth spread on the ground and turned it into a package. Then she watched the people coming and going on the street, looking for familiar figures. "Mom, why don't Dad and Uncle come back? I earned a silver ingot, and Uncle will definitely praise me. I'm busy, I'll be back soon." The woman smiled and turned her head to look at the little peach blossom, who was not at peace for a moment. Little Dehua is lucky. From now on, she will learn fortune-telling and earn a silver ingot every day, so her parents won't have to travel around the world. Little Dehua touched the silver ingot again and thought for a while, that's the elder brother. I'll say hello to my uncle later. Tomorrow I'll figure out when to get married. I think little Dehua is smart, so I rewarded her with a silver coin. I won't come back tomorrow. Little Dehua blinked her big eyes, held up her skirt and muttered, yes, I can't tell fortunes, so I can't accept money from my elder brother. He gave me a deposit and will definitely come tomorrow, otherwise I will return the silver ingot to him. Uncle said that we should rely on our skills to earn money. The woman sighed softly, raised her hand and touched Xiao Dehua's head, and looked at the street again. I don't know how long it took, but there was no one on the street anymore, but little Peach Blossom was still shouting, calculating marriage, calculating good or bad luck. A figure jumped out from the courtyard wall behind the fortune-telling stall. When he landed, he staggered, and his breathing was unsteady. Little Dehua turned her head on the chair, her eyes suddenly lit up, she raised her hand and said, "Uncle is back. Hey, be good." Wu Yu, who was wearing a Taoist robe, had a long sword wrapped in black cloth on his back. A slight smile appeared on his slightly pale face. He stepped forward to lift the package on the ground, turned around and whispered softly, "Close the stall and let's go." The woman froze on the spot and did not look back. Her body was trembling, slightly visible to the naked eye. After a moment of hesitation, she leaned over and picked up the happy little girl. Little Dehua lay on her mother's shoulder, looking around, pouting. "Where's Daddy?" Wu Yu walked towards the street carrying the package and said softly, "Your father is going out to do some errands. Let's leave first and we'll be back in a few days." The woman bit her lip tightly, her eyes suddenly filled with bloodshot eyes, but she didn't say a word, she just held her daughter silently and walked along. Little Dehua looked at the fortune-telling stall abandoned on the street and said with some confusion, "Uncle, I forgot to close the stall." Wu Yu wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled kindly, "I don't want the stall anymore. Don't you want to go to Jiangnan to see the lotus flowers? Let's go to Jiangnan together and buy a new table when we get there." "Ah." Little Dehua blinked her big eyes and shook her head like a rattle. "Let's go the day after tomorrow, wait for Dad to be with us." Your father may be busy for a few more days and has to travel. But, little Dehua pursed her lips, groped in her arms, and took out a silver ingot. Today I promised a big brother that I would ask my uncle to tell his fortune. I gave him all the money. Come over tomorrow. The woman clasped her palms tightly, patted her daughter's back, and smiled slightly. That elder brother is a hero. He won't be able to come tomorrow. The money is for you. No, big brother will definitely come over. If uncle doesn't count his fortune, I have to return the money to him. Wu Yu's nose oozed blood. He raised his sleeve to wipe it, and said with a smile. It's a bit urgent today. I'll return it to him when I have the chance. Ah! Little Dehua lay on her mother's shoulder, looking at the end of the street, holding the silver ingot and thinking for a long time. But big brother will come back tomorrow. If he can't find me, he will say that I lied to him. Well, uncle will do the math for you. If you meet in the future, just return the money to big brother. Jianghu people pay attention to gratification and grudges. Don't you want to learn Kung Fu? Uncle will teach you when he goes to Jiangnan. When you grow up and you are also a Jianghu person, he won't blame you. Oh! The night breeze blew, and the three of them drifted away. In Qingxi Lane, the lanterns outside Sun's shop were swaying in the night wind, and the waxy writing on the wine flags was a little blurry. Shopkeeper Sun put a towel on the table, moved the stools one by one, and placed them upside down on the table. When the last bench was being moved, there was a crack sound coming from outside. It was the sound coming from the iron bluestone, stumbling. Shopkeeper Sun had been running a wine shop all his life. He heard this sound too much. He put the bench down again and walked outside the wine shop to take a look. In the dim alley, a man like an iron tower walked slowly, with his waist bent, and an iron gun resting on the ground. The faintly visible blood stain slid down the bright gunfire, drawing a line in the alley like wolf hairs. Long thin lines. The man was wearing tight black clothes, his hat was torn, his hair was messy, there were many cuts on his body, some of which were deep enough to show the bones, and his flesh and blood were protruding. His messy hair was stuck to his face mixed with blood, and his face could hardly be seen clearly. Shopkeeper Sun took a look, shook his head slightly, returned to the wine shop, took out a jar of wine from the room, and put it in hot water to warm. Shopkeeper, bring me a bottle of wine. A hoarse voice sounded, with blood foam in the throat. Shui Yi walked into the wine shop holding a bloody spear, sat down on the only bench, and breathed a long sigh of relief. Blood dripped from everywhere on his body, staining the ground that had turned black over the years red. Shopkeeper Sun sighed softly and thought about it for a while. Wu Lao Dao. Shui Yi breathed heavily, unloaded the iron gun into two sections, and placed them neatly on the table. After thinking about it, he took a rag and wiped the blood from the iron gun. Old Wu is good at Qinggong, so he left with his family. I, old Shui, have nothing to worry about in my life. I just can't let go of a drink of wine and a gun, so I came to you. Who do you want to leave the gun to? Find someone who is destined to be with you. If you can survive until my daughter comes here, give it to me. It's best not to come here. There's no point in talking about this world. I should have listened to you. I'll always be content with what I have. Happy, haha, it seems that I can't be happy now. Old man son, please tell the truth, do you have any good wine hidden? If so, give me a sip, and you will have less regrets. Shopkeeper Sun sighed, took out the warm wine jar, took out the wine bowl and placed it on the table in front of Shui Yi, uncorked the wine, and poured a bowl. Yes. When I first opened the shop, I brewed a small amount of duanyuyaki. I drank one sip and took another sip. I was always willing to take it out at the end. That's why some people used to call it guillotine. Haha, guillotine, what a name, perfect for the occasion. Shui Yi rubbed his blood-stained hands, picked up the wine bowl and smelled it. His dim eyes became clearer again. He raised the wine bowl to his mouth and drank it all in one gulp. It's refreshing. I owe you money for the wine. Come down and ask me for. Snap. The wine bowl fell to the ground and shattered. Shui Yi hit his head on the table and his hands dropped weakly. The wine shop became quiet and there was no sound anymore. Two sharp iron spears were placed on the table, reflecting the glimmer of light from the lanterns outside. Shopkeeper Sun took a few glances and saw a small peach blossom crookedly carved on the barrel of the iron gun with a sharp blade. Shopkeeper Sun shook his head, raised his hand to pick up the two-section iron gun, walked to the back room, and let out a faint sigh that disappeared in the night wind. When you enter the world of martial arts, it's common for your wife and children to be separated from you. It's a good death to die on the street. How many people can make it through? 4 chapters are 9,500 words, which is considered a big update. Another long week has passed, and the big guys are as awesome as ever. It has been exactly 2 months since the book was opened on April 28, and they have been refreshing the previous record almost from the first day of the book. After all, my first book only had 700 recommendation votes after I finished it, and my second book with 400,000 words has 500 favorites. I am already satisfied with this achievement. Of course, I also hope that I can write better and let more people see it. As I write this, I also have some small reflections. The book Prince can actually be placed in martial arts, fantasy, or fairy tales, because its core is the story. The setting only needs to be slightly changed, and the story will still be the same story. Just like the sentence in the introduction, intrigues in the temple, love and hatred in the world, joys and sorrows in the market, are nothing more than chess pieces, intertwined in series on the chessboard, bursting out little bits of fire. This fire refers to the stories triggered by the interactions between people. The reason why I chose to put it in the history category is that I have written in the history category before and I am familiar with it. Secondly, historical literature is the category closest to reality, second only to urban reality. Placing it in the historical category just makes the story seem more realistic and makes each character look more real. As for the final score, I'm not too worried. After all, no matter how bad it is, it can't be worse than before. As long as it's going up, there will be another one after this book failed. If the score is not good, it can only be said that the level is not enough, but the level is it can be done slowly. I can finish a book with only one review from beginning to end, not to mention that there are now more than 10,000 book friends who are supporting me. A new week has begun again, and if nothing else happens, it should be on the shelves this week. To be honest, the past 2 months have been a bit uncomfortable. Once it is published, you don't have to worry about the word count, recommendations, and data. You can just write it. As for the specific time when it will be put on the shelves, I will post a testimonial after getting the exact news. Before that, all the bosses can cast a recommendation vote to support it. Thank you. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 142. Su Buling was assassinated in Renai Hall, which must have caused quite a stir. That night, the wolf guards from the Criminal Investigation Department came out to search for the traitors who had scattered into the city, and martial law was imposed in all the buildings. It was past 3 o'clock, and the whole place was completely silent. Only the wolf guard occasionally passed by on horseback on the street. Ning Qingyi took Zhongli and Chu Chu out of Renai Hall. It was impossible to really pursue Wu Yu and Shui Yi. He removed his disguise after leaving Hutai Street and returned to the small dilapidated courtyard where he was hiding. The three of them stopped in an uninhabited courtyard. After Hu Yanjie carefully looked at the surrounding environment, he said, "Miss Ning, among the wolf guards who just came over, there was a woman who was selling lanterns today. I took a look at it. She must have been following me to find Renai Hall. The envoy's matter has been leaked and is being targeted. Chang and we can't just stay, we can only meet again in the world. As for the matter of Ning Qingyi attracting Su Buling, Hu Yanjia did not mention it. Although this move broke the rules of the world, thanks to this, he saved his life. If he was really deceived into killing Su Buling for no apparent reason, based on what he saw today, 100 lives would not be enough for him to die. Ning Qingyi didn't take this matter seriously. Someone wanted to kill Su Buling, but he couldn't stop Su Buling from doing it. He could only blame Fourth Master Chen for his bad luck and meeting a brainless financial owner. When Ning Qingyi learned about Hu Yanjia and Zhongli Chuchu pretending to be envoys, he immediately raised his hand and said, "Think twice before doing anything in the future, and take care along the way." Hu Yanjia clasped his fists in return, then turned around and quickly jumped over the courtyard wall, disappearing into the vast night. Ning Qingyi turned her eyes to Zhongli Chuchu and saw that she didn't leave, feeling a little confused. Anything else? Zhongli Chuchu is still frightened. If Su Buling hadn't come to her aid during the battle, she would have been stabbed through by an iron gun. Although she turned her back just now to do things for Su Buling, she still needs to say a word of thanks. Moreover, Zhongli Chuchu has been traveling around the world for many years, and he has always looked down upon men, especially Wen Zozo, a scholar from the Central Plains. But the last glimpse outside the restaurant actually gave her a feeling of being unattainable. No matter how arrogant a man was in the past, his attitude would change drastically after seeing her appearance, and he would start to be attentive without any idea. Although Zhongli Chuchu didn't take pleasure in this, at this moment, she really wanted to see what the Prince of Central Plains, who was both magnificent and a bit cynical, would do when he saw her appearance. "Miss Ning, will your friend come over later?" Ning Qingyi's slender eyebrows frowned slightly. "You know his identity. There was a big mess today and I didn't have time to come over." Zhongli's clear green eyes showed a bit of pity. After looking at Ning Qingyi for a few times, "Can I ask you a question?" "Explain." "That young prince, what was your reaction when he saw your appearance for the first time?" When Ning Qingyi saw her asking about this, she was a little confused. After thinking about it for a moment, she frowned. Men are all the same, what kind of reaction can they have? His sweet words are not pleasing to the eye, however, he can be considered a real person, and he is still a good person. Zhongli Chuchu suddenly understood, it was nothing more than that. It seemed that he was also a playboy who couldn't walk when he saw a beautiful woman. When he saw her in the future, he would probably have a similar reaction. Thinking of this, Zhongli Chuchu showed a bright smile and raised the corner of his mouth. "I wanted to get to know him, but it's a pity that my face is covered tonight and there are many complications. Now that I'm gone, I don't know when we can meet again in the world." He is not a Jianghu person. You may not see him again in your life. It's a bit blunt, but it's true. For the powerful feudal lord, Jianghu was just a small pond and would not interest him at all. And a foreigner like Zhongli Chuchu was not qualified to be a retainer in the palace, so there was no chance of contact with Su Buling. Zhongli Chuchu chuckled and thought for a moment, "As long as you are a human being, you will always remember favors. I heard that he was infected with the dragon lock goo, is it true?" Ning Qingyi's eyes narrowed slightly, and her expression suddenly changed a bit. "Do you know the solution to the dragon locking goo?" He. Zhongli Chuchu covered her lips with her red sleeves and smiled sweetly. "Miss Ning really cares about the young prince. He helped me save my life, so of course he cares. If you knew about it, you would also remember him personally." Zhongli walked slowly to the eaves, pulled up a small stool and sat down. "Dragon locking goo comes from southern Xinjiang. It is originally an unheralded secret technique of Beikong Valley. It is extremely domineering and can kill you. It used to be very famous in Baiyu. But it's lost." Ning Qingyi sat down opposite and put the long sword on his knees. "I know it's lost. Do you know how to detoxify it?" Zhongli Chuchu shook his head. The dragon-locking poison is so overbearing that it corrodes the limbs and bones. There is no cure. We can only warm the body and suppress the cold poison with strong wine. Maybe we can live to old age, but we will definitely be a useless person in this life. For the young prince, he should be an ordinary person in this life. He should not be deeply poisoned, otherwise he will not be able to live and thrive, but it will be a matter of time before the poison develops. There is no cure. Ning Qingyi's face turned serious. Is there nothing you can do? Zhongli nodded. Chuchu, if there is an antidote, the locking dragon goo will not change people's minds. Many people in Biojianghu have been infected by this poison, and I have never heard of it being solved. Ning Qingyi opened her mouth, her beautiful face clearly showing a bit of disappointment. She remained silent for a while, and sighed softly. Zhongli thought for a while and said, I also use poison. I heard my master tell me how to raise poisonous insects. Generally speaking, poisonous insects are alive. In order to prevent them from harming themselves, after the poisonous insects become poisonous insects, they will be fed with their own blood. As time goes by, when the poisonous insects mature, they will not poison the owner, nor will they harm people with the same bloodline as the owner. Ning Qingyi didn't understand this kind of secret technique in southern Xinjiang, but he understood the meaning clearly. If you have the same bloodline as the goo breeder, you won't be poisoned. If you are poisoned, it means you are not related by blood, and there is no solution at all. Zhongli nodded. Chuchu was silent for a moment, and then remembered something. It's not completely helpless. My master has studied these things, but they may not be useful. Ning Qingyi's eyes lit up. Say it, it's better than waiting to die. Zhongli Chuchu's eyes were a bit strange. He leaned over to Ning Qingyi's ear and whispered a few words. Ning Qingyi's brows gradually furrowed and he hesitated for a moment. Doesn't it mean that we still have to find the goo breeder? It would be fine to find a relative with the same bloodline, but this method was developed by my master. She has never been very reliable, so don't put too much hope in it. If there is a way, it will be done. The poison was given by the emperor. Just find a princess and try it and you will know. Zhongli Chuchu sneered. Even if it was poisoned by Emperor Daiyue, how could the 9th emperor raise the poison himself? Ning Qingyi felt a little embarrassed when he thought about it. The whole Daiyue belongs to the emperor. As long as the emperor doesn't hand over the person who raised the poison, it won't help. Zhongli thought about it carefully. Longsuo Gu comes from southern Xinjiang and is not available here in Daiyue. Before Jiazi, the Bio Kingdom was destroyed, and Baikong Valley was regarded as a crooked way. It was slaughtered and set on fire by the Daiyue court. Many poisons. The poison was lost, but after that, several people in Daiyue Jianghu were poisoned by the poison, and it was rumored that the sword master Zhu Silk Mountain was poisoned. Are you saying that the imperial court secretly took away the dragon-locking goo at that time? It has been more than 60 years. The goo insect has an extremely long lifespan. It can kill people after sleeping in a mausoleum for thousands of years. 60 years is nothing. If it was the dragon-locking goo under the imperial court, the possibility of taking it away at that time is very high, but the one who led the troops to defeat Baiyu is Su Lai. This is really interesting. Ning Qingyi was also stunned. Yes, it was Su Lai who led the troops to defeat Baiyu. If Su Lai handed over the dragon-locking goo to the court, the emperor would not be able to use this thing to poison Su Buling even if he was a pig. This is not just pour dirty water on yourself. The two of them were puzzled. Zhongli and Chuchu had to dare to leave Chang'an before martial law. They didn't dare to stay for a long time. They stood up and said, "That's all I know. If the young prince is cured of his poison, he owes me his life. Remember to ask him to come and thank me." With that said, he stepped out of the courtyard wall and disappeared into the night. Ning Qingyi sat there and thought for a moment, feeling that it would be better to wait for Su Buling to come over and tell the news. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gongzi. Chapter 143. The next morning. Because of the 15th day of the lunar month, the weather was getting warmer and warmer. Su Buling got up from the empty palace, rubbed his eyebrows tiredly, and stretched out at the window. When he returned to the palace last night, he was afraid that Mrs. Lu would worry, so he ran directly to the other courtyard of Jinghua Garden to report to Mrs. Lu that he was safe. Mrs. Lu was so scared when she heard the news. She was about to go to find him. When she found that he was alive and well, her worry turned into a woman's anger. She went out and asked someone to put pressure on the emperor. Speaking of it, it was a bit like a child being bullied outside, and the adults helped to stand up. Although Su Buling was not a child, the Li family had done something terrible. He personally went to the door to kill people, which gave the emperor a chance to smooth things over. He could just pretend to be seriously injured at home. Mrs. Lu was the daughter-in-law of the Xiao family and the legitimate daughter of the Lu family. If the Li family was not made to pay the price, the octagonal archway of the three families of Xiao, Lu, and Su could be directly demolished. Because the matter was serious, the news of his assassination had been sent to Suzhou City last night in an emergency over 800 miles. The next step was to see the emperor's reaction. There was nothing to do in the palace, so Su Buling practiced sword in the garden for a while. When the sun was about 3 o'clock, the morning court in the palace was over, and Lao Xiao, who was responsible for waiting for news, ran back. "Young prince! Young prince!" In the corridor, Lao Xiao came trotting with a cane, and raised his hand from a distance and said, "It seems a little wrong." Su Buling put away his sword, walked to the corridor, frowned and said, "What? Your Majesty acted decisively and killed Li Beiyi." This was also the result Su Buling expected. If the emperor didn't want him to leave Chang'an, he would definitely not give Prince Su an excuse to complain. What was unexpected was that old Xiao shook his head. He was chopped, but the process was wrong. He was chopped on the spot. So ruthless. Old Xiao leaned on his crutches and pondered for a while. According to our estimation, the emperor will definitely kill Li Beiyi to give an explanation to Prince Su. If he favors the Li family because of the old relationship, Prince Su can use this as an excuse to take the young prince back. That's right, what's wrong? Old Xiao recalled the situation in Taiji Hall. Li Beiyi had already pleaded guilty yesterday and took out a son to take the blame, saying that the bastard had to take revenge for his brother. No one would believe this reason. But the young prince wanted to protect Master Chen Si, and no one testified against Li Beiyi. At the morning court, Lord Lu Cheng'an, Prime Minister Xiao, and the censors, they were all impeaching Li Beiyi and asking the emperor to severely punish the Li family. Even the Queen Mother was forced by Mrs. Lu to pass on the message to the emperor. Su Buling nodded, then the emperor followed the trend and executed Li Beiyi with tears. Old Xiao spread his hands, a little puzzled. It should be like this, but the emperor thought differently from us. He talked about the merits of the ancestors of the Li family, the unforgivable crime of the father's revenge. The little prince was seriously injured but his life was not in danger, etc., which means that Li Beiyi was wrong, but the crime was not punishable by death, and a slight punishment would be enough. Su Buling spread his hands. That's it, let my father take me back to Suzhou City on this basis. Can the emperor still keep me? This is where the weird thing is. Old Xiao leaned on his crutches and frowned. It was originally Prime Minister Xiao He and Lord Lu wanted to kill Li Beiyi as a warning to others, so as not to displease the princes, but the emperor was reluctant to kill him because of their old friendship. As a result, when Lu Yunlin, deputy envoy of the investigation department, led people to search the Li family, they found some hard evidence of past fraud and withholding of military pay. Dayu has had strict military discipline since the founding of the country. The emperor didn't say a word, just dragged Li Beiyi out and chopped him up, searched his house, and directly removed his name from Kuishao Street. Su Buling frowned, stood with his hands behind his back and thought for a moment. The emperor began to try his best to protect Li Beiyi against all odds, and searched the Li family again after finding evidence of his crime. What does it mean? Old Xiao pouted. It means that the emperor's reaction is fine, and he wants to make a big deal out of a small matter and not kill Li Beiyi. But Li Beiyi still died, and died miserably. Prince Su was embarrassed to complain, and the little prince, I still can't go back. Su Buling nodded and spread his hands. After talking for a long time, you still won't let me go. I guess the wolf guards have evidence of the Li family's crimes for a long time, and they just took it out now. This way, they can kill them justifiably, but the punishment will not be too severe to make the meritorious officials feel disappointed. That's about it. We still have to wait for the knife. Old Xiao leaned on his crutches and sighed. He knew that there was no point in saying more about this matter, so he changed the subject. By the way, Miss Ning found Lao Ba and asked you to go there as soon as possible. It seems that she has something to tell you. Su Buling's mind was a little confused. He pondered for a moment. Anyway, the Li family deserved it, and the situation did not get worse. He didn't think about it anymore, disguised himself, and went out of the palace gate. Because of the chaos last night, Chang'an City has been under martial law, and there are soldiers and wolf guards patrolling everywhere. Su Buling rode an ordinary horse and did not go directly to Ning Qingyi's courtyard. He went to Hutai Street first. The area around Hutai Street is the gathering center for the gangsters. Yesterday, another major case that shocked the government and the public occurred in Renai Hall. At this time, the patrol was the strictest. Wolf guards were everywhere. All the gangsters were trembling in their houses. There were very few pedestrians on the street. After walking around the street, I found the place where I had fortune told last night. I took a look and it was empty. Su Buling looked around. There were few people on the street. There was no sign of the quirky little girl. However, thinking that there was such a big mess last night, the vendors here would definitely not dare to stay, so he was relieved. After a short pause, Su Buling drove his horse to turn back, but saw Ning Qingyi, dressed in a white dress and a veil hat like an ordinary lady, standing at the entrance of an alley. When he turned around, her figure disappeared in a flash. Su Buling chuckled, dismounted, and walked into the alley, looking at the graceful white-clothed female knight in the alley. How did Miss Ning know I would come here? Young master is trustworthy and keeps his word. He said he would come yesterday, and he would definitely come. He would not lie to a girl. Su Buling curled his lips. I, Su Buling, always keep my word, and it's the same for everyone. Ning Qingyi walked beside Su Buling with his hands behind his back without holding a sword, thinking for a while. But the little girl broke her promise. I think it was because of the adults. I think the little girl is very sensible and must still miss you. Su Buling smiled, looked back at the street, and changed the subject. You are in a hurry to find me here, you don't want to break up, say goodbye before leaving. Ning Qingyi turned his head, his expression serious. I found the clue of the dragon locking goo. Su Buling's slightly frivolous smile froze. He didn't expect Ning Qingyi, who was about to leave, to suddenly say such a meaningful sentence. He returned to his usual cold expression, frowned and said seriously. Really? Don't bluff me. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 144. In the quiet alley, Ning Qingyi nodded seriously and thought about it for a while. Zhongli Chuchu last night is from the Jianghu area in southern Xinjiang. She is good at using poisons. Although she has never been exposed to dragon lock goo, she has certain insights into how to raise the poison. Of course, she does not guarantee that it will be useful. Su Buling showed a bit of surprise. There is a way that is better than waiting to die. Tell me, I can give it a try even if it means mountains of swords, mountains of fire, seas of fire. Ning Qingyi paused, thinking of what Zhongli Chuchu said last night, and seemed a little hesitant. After all, Zhongli Chuchu's method is a bit hard to explain. After a moment of silence, Ning Qingyi raised her hand and took off the curtain, revealing a face that was stunning no matter how many times she saw it. She was rarely dressed up, and her red lips were as red as lacquer, which suppressed the coldness of the past and made her look a little more bright. Su Buling blinked and stood in front of Ning Qingyi as if he was all ears, but he also knew that she was here to say goodbye. Ning Qingyi's red lips opened slightly, but she hesitated to speak. Finally, she put the curtain hat on her lower back, stood on tiptoes and leaned towards Su Buling's ear. This action. There is no one in the alley, the warm sun is shining slowly, and the beautiful woman has beautiful eyes in front of her. Su Buling raised his eyebrows, naturally understanding. Although she was a little confused as to why Ning Qingyi, who had always been cold, became so proactive, the other party was about to leave, so she couldn't help but couldn't tell. Su Buling was not an ignorant young man, but a beautiful lady took the initiative. Naturally, he could not be a fool. He lowered his head slightly and put his lips in his mouth. The four lips meet, cool and soft, with a hint of sweetness. The whole world seemed to freeze. Ning Qingyi stood on the spot on her tiptoes, with a bit of confusion in her clear spring eyes. The curtain hat fell to the ground, and he didn't even react when his teeth were pried open. He just stared blankly. Su Buling's eyebrows were curved with a bit of a smile, and he raised his hands to wrap around his willow-like waist, tasting a bit of red lips with a bit of aggression. In fact, they say they like Ning Qingyi. They don't have much contact with each other, and they don't even speak a few words. It's just a chance meeting. To say that I don't like her seems a bit deceiving myself. After all, she is so beautiful. What man doesn't like beautiful girls? Just pretend that I just fell in love. The alley is quiet, except for a pair of beautiful people hugging each other and doing shameful things. After an unknown amount of time, Ning Qingyi noticed the thief's hands in front of her and finally reacted. Woo! Ning Qingyi's whole body shook violently, revealing a bit of disbelief. He took half a step back and pushed Su Buling away, and then slapped Su Buling on the head. The shot was fierce, powerful, and heavy, full of anger and killing intent. It's a pity that Su Buling was not confused and easily held Ning Qingyi's wrist with a gentle smile. What? Does it hurt you? Sigh, you bastard, I'll kill you. Ning Qingyi's cold cheeks were red, and her eyelashes couldn't stop trembling. She angrily took out her hand and touched the sword at her waist, but found that she didn't have it with her, so she started to fight again. But the only thing that can be used at this time is the tortoise punch. Su Buling grabbed Ning Qingyi's wrist again, feeling a little confused. He just pinched it during the kiss. Why did he get so angry? Just get used to it, don't do anything, talk about business, otherwise I'll be tough and you won't be able to beat me. Let me go and die. Ning Qingyi was talking incoherently. After realizing that she couldn't beat Su Buling, she angrily withdrew her hand and wiped her lips, turned around and ran deeper into the alley. Su Buling was a little confused, picked up the curtain hat and walked quickly beside him. You wanted to kiss me, why are you blaming me? You. Ning Qingyi was so angry that she trembled all over, stopped in her tracks, and stared at Su Buling coldly. She has always admired Su Buling, who has high martial arts skills and good character, and is very kind to her, so she has always treated him as a confidant. But she never expected that this pervert would be so shameless. Su Buletinling looked at him carefully. He seemed to have murderous intent, and it didn't look like he liked him. Could it be possible that I got it wrong? It shouldn't be. Su Buletinling froze slightly, and with his mind racing, he quickly said, misunderstanding, misunderstanding, missing, my infatuation for you is a lesson to be learned, I just couldn't help it and was impulsive. You are just a pervert, your life is at stake, and you still think about a frivolous woman. Ning Qingyi was confused, her legs were shaking slightly, she took a few breaths, then turned and left. Su Buletinling was speechless, he was really wrong. Children of the Jianghu, we pay attention to gratification and grudges. How about I save you a few times? Ning Qingyi paused, clasping her hands tightly, remembering Su Buling's life-saving grace for her. After a moment of silence, Ning Qingyi suppressed her anger, turned around and said coldly. The locking dragon Gu came from the Bayou Valley. Before Jiazi, General Su led his troops to break through Bayou and wiped out many copycat sections. The Biang Valley was among them. If the emperor did it to you, the locking dragon Gu might be that when the time comes, go back and check it yourself. Su Buling frowned slightly. The dragon locking Gu had been lost for a long time. Before he had the irrefutable evidence of Jia Yi and the corpse, he only doubted the court because there was no evidence that the court possessed the dragon locking Gu. Now that we know that there is locking dragon Gu in the inner treasury, it is more likely that it was secretly searched for from the rivers and lakes. If Jiazichi and Pingbiu had obtained the locking dragon Gu and handed it over to the imperial court, it would have been impossible to hide it from everyone's eyes and ears. There was no way the emperor would have risked poisoning him with such a thing, and more than 60 years had passed. Su Buling pondered for a moment and nodded gently, I'll go back and look through the records of the battle that year to see if I can find some clues. Anything else? Ning Qingyi took a breath, forced himself to suppress his emotions, and said coldly. Don't move, I'm telling you a secret, if you dare to move, I'll fight you to the death. Su Buling's expression was serious, and he spread his arms with a look of I'm a wooden man. Ning Qingyi covered his lips and stared at Su Buling cautiously. After making sure there was no problem, he leaned close to Su Buling's ear and whispered Zhongli Chuchu's words. The fragrant breeze blew on his face, and Su Buling couldn't help but think of the sweetness and moisture just now, and he was a little distracted. But after hearing Ning Qingyi's words, he was stunned, frowned, and looked like are you kidding me? After Ning Qingyi finished speaking, he took back the veil and turned around and ran, we have settled our grievances, just pretend that I have never seen you. Su Buling raised his hand, don't leave so quickly, I'll see you off. The mountains remain unchanged, the water flows forever, and we will never see each other again. Ning Qingyi hurriedly walked, her white long skirt rustling in the wind. After a few jumps and leaps onto the eaves, she looked back, put on the veil, and disappeared among the buildings. Su Buling watched her from afar, raised his hand to touch his lips, thought for a moment, and shouted again. See you again in the rivers and lakes. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gongzi. Chapter 145. At noon, Su Buling drove his horse back to Kuishao Street. Soldiers gathered on the long street, and many officials gathered around the door of Li's house at the end of the street to ransack the house and arrest people. Dayo founded the country by force and attached great importance to the construction of the military. The matter of false claims and deductions of military pay was more serious than the fraud in the imperial examination. The confiscation of his house and exile was considered a light punishment. This matter has nothing to do with Li Beiyi's premeditated assassination. Li Beiyi is dead anyway, and Su Buling has no intention of paying attention to the final fate of the Li family. The most important thing is the dragon locking Gu on his body. After coming to Chang'an for more than a year, Lao Xiao has secretly made inquiries in many places. There are all kinds of messy news, but there is almost no news that can really solve the problem of the maggot attached to the bone. Even if there is irrefutable evidence pointing out the murderer, it cannot change the current predicament. The news brought by Ningqingyi can be regarded as one of many news in the world, and the so-called yin and yang combination detoxification method is a bit unconvincing. Maybe he was in a hurry and sought medical treatment. When there was no way out, any news was hard to come by. Even if he had failed many times before, and no matter how incredible the news he got, he still had to do what needed to be investigated and confirmed. The horses ran across the street and arrived outside Jinghua Garden behind the Xiao family. Su Buling got off his horse, straightened his clothes a little, and walked to the courtyard by the lake. Pingbiu happened before Jiazi, and there were already 3 emperors. It has already become a thing of the past. No one has lived in Prince Su's mansion for many years, and it is impossible to store any books or files. If you want to find out what happened back then without attracting the attention of interested people, you still have to go find Aunt Lu. The warm sun was in the sky, and several maids in the Kinja courtyard gathered around the waterside pavilion and talked about the secrets of the boudoir. The moon slave listened with an embroidery needle, and the courtyard was very quiet. Mrs. Lu ran around to seek justice for Su Buling last night. She returned to the other courtyard in the early morning and rested after making sure that the Li family had received the punishment they deserved. The courtyard was very quiet. After Su Buling learned about this situation from Yunu, although he felt a little anxious, he didn't want to wake up Mrs. Lu, who had just fallen asleep, so he sat down in the yard outside the boudoir and poured himself a drink with a wine bottle. We waited from noon until the sun set in the west. A rustling sound came from the small boudoir, and a gentle, slightly tired voice spoke. Moon slave. Su Buling put down the wine gourd, stood up, walked outside the wing and opened the door. He was about to call out with a bright smile, but when he raised his eyes, he saw Mrs. Lu standing by the TC, drinking from a water glass. The room was very warm. Mrs. Lu must have been thirsty. After getting up, she stepped on her palace boots and walked out of the bead curtain without wearing any clothes. The bellyband embroidered with peonies clung tightly to her body, and the slender ropes were a little overwhelmed. White thin trousers wrap around the waist and legs. The water cloud brocade produced in the Jiangnan water town is as thin as a cicada's wing, with a hint of flesh color and the outline of a camel's toe looming. It is plump, soft, and moist like warm jade. Holding the cup with both hands and drinking water in a hurry, a drop of water slipped from the corner of the lips to the chin, and then dripped on the peony flowers, dipping the white cloth until it was almost transparent. When she noticed that the door was pushed open, Mrs. Lu moved her eyes towards the door. Hiss. Su Buling took a surprised look and secretly thought something was wrong, and quickly closed the door behind him. The door opened and closed almost simultaneously, with only a soft squeak sound. In the blink of an eye, Mrs. Lu found that the door had been closed, and she put down the water glass with some doubts. Moon slave. Su Buling stood outside the door in a panic. Just as he was thinking about how to explain, he saw Yunu standing under the eaves in a winter skirt, holding washing utensils in his hand and stunned. Su Buling was granted amnesty, and he ran to Yunu with his hands and feet. With a look in his eyes, he raised his hand and pushed Yunu towards the door. Yunu can be the personal maid of a young lady from an aristocratic family, so she must not be stupid. She naturally understands what Su Buling saw just now, looking like he was hesitating to speak. Su Buling's face was full of embarrassment. He made a shh gesture, and quickly waved his hand to signal Yunu to respond quickly. Although Yunu was the same age as Mrs. Lu, her status was so different that it was hard to disobey the young prince. She glanced at Su Buling with a strange look in her eyes and walked to the door. "Ma'am, what's wrong? Did you open the door just now?" "Well, I forgot to bring the towel." "Go back and get it." "Oh, hurry up and go. By the way, madam, the young prince came here at noon and has been waiting outside." "Ah. Let your child come in quickly. Why don't you call me? He was angry yesterday and hasn't recovered yet." The young prince didn't want to disturb his wife's rest, so he didn't let the maid report. Yeah, I still have some conscience. Outside the room, Su Buling let out a long sigh of relief and looked at Yunu with gratitude. Yunu leaned over and smiled, turned around and pretended to take a towel, thought for a while, and suddenly asked in a low voice. My dear prince, does your wife look good? Su Buletinling put on a straight face. Don't talk nonsense, go get the towel quickly. He. Yunu snickered, then ran away holding the toiletries. After a while, Mrs. Lu finished washing, changed into a long blue dress, tidied up, and then left the room. With a smile, she looked at the young man in white who was standing in the courtyard with his hands behind his hands and looking at the sun. Ling why didn't you call me when you came here? Su Buling turned around, showed a bright smile, and walked to the eaves. Aunt Lu spent the whole night running around. She should have a good rest. I'm fine anyway, so it doesn't hurt to wait. Mrs. Lu smiled gently, and naturally stretched out her arm for Su Buling to hold onto, walking side by side. Li Beiyi took the courage of a leopard and actually dared to attack you and prevent the Li family from being expelled from Kuishao Street. My aunt's job was for nothing. Just be fine. Don't go out and mess around at night. You're a good boy. The prince acted inappropriately and went to Hutai Street pretending to be a traveler. Don't you mind the price drop? Su Buling held his soft arms and shook his head. I have nothing to do. I just heard some news and went to take a look. Mrs. Lu gave a faint hum, thought for a moment, and then remembered what happened a few days ago. By the way, the Queen Mother came to see you a few days ago. She didn't know what the illness was. She insisted on letting you go to the palace to see her. She also ran to the Holy One and asked the Holy One to send you to her to take care of you. If I hadn't thought that she was an elder, I would have driven her back to Huainan. Su Buling naturally knew why the Queen Mother was looking for him, as the lotus and hidden carp were still on her body. But obviously he didn't dare to say it out loud, so he could only laugh it off. The Queen Mother has been in the palace for a long time without anyone to accompany her, so it's natural for her to be a little bored. I've been to the palace a few times, and my speech and behavior may be more steady than Xiaoting's. The Queen Mother probably also wants to chat with me to relieve her boredom. Mrs. Lu also thought the same and nodded. She has a beautiful idea. You are not allowed to go to the palace in the future. The Queen Mother has been unruly and willful since she was a child. Now that she is older, she has not gotten rid of her problems. If she really thinks about it, with your thoughts, you will definitely go around asking for help, so it's better for you to stay away. Su Buling naturally agreed. Don't worry, Aunt Lu, I will definitely stay far away. How can the Queen Mother be as caring as Aunt Lu? Your child is not a white-eyed wolf. He will stay in front of Aunt Lu all his life. Mrs. Lu was then satisfied. Su Buling accompanied Mrs. Lu on a walk by the lake to exercise. After thinking about it for a while, he asked seemingly unintentionally. By the way, I accidentally heard the caravans from South Vietnam talking about the war in the past few days on the street. It was my grandfather who broke the Bio Kingdom, but I have been stupid about optical martial arts since I was a child, and I have basically no books. After reading a few books, I really don't understand what happened back then. Mrs. Lu said lightly, if you don't even know the great achievements of the Su family, how can you be King Su in the future? Well, but that's right, you can be forgiven for not knowing what happened more than 60 years ago. When Emperor Xiaozong was in power, although it was a scene of competition between the three kingdoms, Baiyu was located in southern Xinjiang, with high mountains and a lack of materials. There were not even many grain-producing lands, and the national strength was very weak. Old General Su personally led his troops south and arrived in Liuzhu without basically fighting a big battle. There was nothing to say. It is powerful to counter Daki's armored iron Rakshasa. At that time, Dao's country was weak and did not have Ma Yuan's heavy armor, but Daki's 30,000 iron Rakshasa was equipped with armor and riding equipment, and was invincible in the world. Old General Su used his teeth. Bit by bit, I never gave up my military service for a day in my life. When I was over 50 years old and became a king, I only thought of marrying a daughter-in-law to stay as a queen. Su Buling listened quietly for a moment, then said with a smile, "Aunt Lu, do you have any books here that record the war situation?" Mrs. Lu also felt that it was difficult to recreate the tragic battlefield of that year just by talking about it. As the crown prince of Prince Su, he could lead troops to march north at any time. It was a good thing to understand this, so she nodded immediately. There are detailed records in the Xiao family. I will take you there later. Su Buletinling nodded. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 146. After Su Buling had dinner with Mrs. Lu, they went to the Xiao family mansion in front and found the archives of Jiaziqianping and Qi Baiyu from the Xiao mansion. The Xiao family has worshipped the prime minister for generations, and the records in it must be detailed, but the price is that there are too many files. After many years of fighting in the south and north until entering Chang'an, it is difficult to count the number of large and small battles fought. There are also rationing of baggage, recruitment and dispatch, post-war resettlement, etc. One can imagine how many files there are. Su Buling's scalp went numb after just a glance. It was definitely impossible to spend time in the library looking for it. After saying hello to the Xiao family, he called the palace guards to carry 2 large boxes back to the palace. The military deployment in history is not a secret. It is information for the Xiao family's children to check. Basically, the general family has it. The Xiao family naturally didn't say anything. Just remember it. At dusk, candles were burning in the study room of Prince Su's mansion, and the swords shone sharply on the carved tiger orchid. Su Buling sat on the ground next to the pile of books. Lao Xiao and several dead soldiers from the royal palace were also similar, frowning and searching carefully among the books placed on the floor. Lao Xiao took the file, licked his fingers and turned the page, and said with some suspicion, "Little prince, Miss Ning is kind-hearted, but the method of detoxification is a bit confusing. Drinking human blood and using human flesh as medicine are a little bit, the truth is, this is the same as the yin and yang of the person who raises the poison until the essence is released from the body." Su Buling also had a weird look on his face, shaking his head with a look of dossiers. Well, poisonous poisons are very mysterious. Not many people even know how to raise poisonous poisons. I have to give it a try. Old Xiao pouted and thought for a while. It's not impossible to give it a try, but if the person who raises the poison is a man, or in his 70s or 80s, the young prince may not be able to lift a gun, but for men, as long as they hate it, regardless of gender, age, or child. Stop it. Su Buling had goosebumps all over his body and frowned. According to Miss Ning, as long as you have the same bloodline as the Gu breeder. What if a Gu breeder has no father, no mother, no wife, no children, and is still a eunuch? Ha ha ha. Surrounded by the unsmiling royal guards, some of them couldn't hold back their laughter. Su Buling's face was covered with black lines and he snorted lightly. If this is really the case, my life is almost gone. What else can I do but endure it? Old Xiao shook his head, frowned and said, "This person is the one who raised the poison. It wasn't the prince who stabbed him, it was him." Hiss. Su Buling raised his hand, stopped Lao Xiao who was not serious in his words, and thought about it for a while. If the other party is a eunuch, wouldn't it be a dead end? That's not true. Men still have a chance. Su Buling dropped the book on the ground and rubbed his forehead. Forget it if you die, I won't look for you anymore. Lao Xiao shrugged his shoulders. Lao Xiao, I also prepared for the worst. How could there be such a coincidence? There are always relatives without daughters. Nagging, rummaging around. Because of the search target of 100 Insect Valley, the scope was narrowed a lot. About when the sun set, the boss of the guard had a look on his face. He got up from the ground and walked over to Su Buling. He knelt down and pointed at a page in the book. Young prince, I found it. Su Buling was having a nightmare, and he took the book over with some confusion, but before he could take a closer look, a name came into view. Xiao Ying. When Lao Xiao heard this, he was stunned for a moment, and he came closer to take a look. Oh, he is really the old head of the Xiao family in Huainan. This news is not very good. Su Buletinling's face darkened. He picked up the book and read the records carefully, word for word. Because Baichong Valley is just an evil force in the Jianghu, and it is grouped together with other cottages and bandit houses. It was probably Su Lai who led his troops south to quell Baiyu before Jiezi. The military advisor at that time was Xiao Ying, who was also the prime minister of the dynasty Xiao Ying. Chu Yang's grandfather. It is precisely because of Xiao Ying, who is known as the unparalleled national scholar, that he played such an important role in the battle to bring peace to the world in Dayu. The status of the Xiao family in Huainan has soared to the sky, becoming the head of the family in Dayu, even lower than the Lu family. First gear. However, the attack on South Vietnam was the beginning of Dayu's army. Xiao Ying's status was not as transcendent as after the peace of the world. At that time, she only served as an ordinary military advisor to advise Su Lai. Dayu's army almost pushed through South Vietnam flatly. After the army passed by, banditry broke out in the mountains and fields. After occupying the cities and counties, they had to hold on to appease the people and resume farming. Xiao Ying was responsible for this aspect, leading troops and horses to clean up the bandit forces in the mountains and fields. Because many soldiers were killed by poisons, the imperial court hated this aspect very much, and basically wiped out all the evil ways of cultivating poisons and making poisons, and it was at that time that the 100 Insect Valley was leveled. After reading these records, Lao Xiao frowned and thought for a moment. Old King Su was the commander-in-chief of the army. It was precisely because the army was united that it was able to fight with great strength. At that time, everyone from top to bottom basically obeyed old Su King. King Lao Su was extremely loyal to Emperor Xiaozong. At that time, Emperor Xiaozong ordered the eradication of evil sects in the mountains and wilds, especially those who raised poison and harmed people. With King Lao Su's temperament, he would not keep a single person alive, let alone let him hide it privately. If the locking dragon goo was secretly hidden at that time, even though it was just a trivial matter, it is impossible for us not to record it at all, then. Su Buling put down the book and frowned. My grandfather's eyes and ears are all in the army. They can disobey military orders and take poisonous poison privately without being discovered. There are not many people in the army. If the dragon locking goo was really secretly used, there is no one else brought back except Xiao Ying. Lao Xiao rubbed his crutches, his face became a little more serious, and he thought about it. The Huainan Xiao family is good at strange things and gossip, and is also involved in various strange and obscene skills. This has been known to everyone hundreds of years ago. Although locking dragon goo is overbearing and vicious, it is indeed a unique masterpiece in the world and has never been seen before. People can cultivate more powerful poisonous poisons. With the Xiao family's consistent style, they are reluctant to let such objects disappear into the world, so it is not impossible to keep them privately. But why did the Xiao family poison the young prince? The members of the aristocratic family have always been just outsiders. They will add icing on the cake and add insult to injury, but they will never act as a leader. King Su has the capital to raise an army. According to their style of acting, they will only win over each other and not enmity. Su Buling was also confused here, and thought carefully, it is impossible for the Xiao family to poison me. The Xiao family has transcended the world. Just the guardian of the family property can pass on the incense for thousands of years. And after my death, my father raised an army. It really broke the news that the world in Chang'an changed hands, and the Xiao family in Huainan was gone, and even if the Xiao family took action, it couldn't have been ordered by the Holy Emperor. If the Xiao family used this as a surrender certificate to change the family, let's say, the emperor has no way to kill the meritorious deeds after that, the Song family may be gone. Old Xiao nodded, then this news is not accurate. Maybe the dragon locking goo on the young prince came from somewhere else, not from 100 Insect Valley. Su Buling thought for a long time and shook his head. The wolf guard who died violently was undoubtedly the locking dragon goo. The poisonous poison must have been spread from the imperial court. The most likely possibility is to get the locking dragon goo from the 100 Insect Valley. In any case, gotta check it out. Old Xiao spread his hands. How to check this? The young prince's being infected by the dragon lock goo is very involved. Even Mrs. Lu, the daughter-in-law of the Xiao family, doesn't know about such secrets. The only people in the world who know about it are probably the direct descendants of the Xiao family. You can't ask Xiao Xianju if he doesn't have the locking dragon goo. The guards of the Xiao mansion are not much worse than those of the imperial city. Su Buletinling rubbed his fingers and hesitated for a while. A direct descendant of the Xiao family, Xiao Ting. Old Xiao smacked his lips, looking like the young prince is seriously ill. Su Buling also knew that it was impossible. If Xiao Ting, a big talker, could know the secrets of the Xiao family in Huainan, the Xiao family would be gone long ago. The popularity of the Xiao family has withered over the years. After Aunt Lu's husband passed away at an early age, the eldest son's line died immediately. The second son Xiao Chuang was replaced to take the lead. There are only a few people left in the Xiao family's direct line, except for Xiao Xiang and Xiao Ting. Among the direct descendants of the Xiao family who remain in Chang'an City, the only one left is the Queen Mother, the Queen Mother. Su Buling said this, touched his chin and looked towards the direction of the imperial city. Old Xiao thought about it for a moment. I'm afraid we can only take action from the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother is a woman and it is unlikely that she will know about this matter, but at least we can talk to Mr. Xiao. Su Buletinling's face became tangled. He had offended the Queen Mother a few days ago, and it seemed a bit unrealistic to ask this now. And if the locking dragon goo really came from the Xiao family, maybe the Queen Mother would be bullied, well, maybe to the point of rolling her eyes. Hiss. Su Buling rubbed his forehead, stood up and walked a few times, looked at the direction of the imperial city, and finally muttered secretly. My life is almost gone, why bother doing so much? The 12th major update may be on the shelves tomorrow. I won't say too much. I just hope that I can complete the rest of the journey with you. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gongzi. Chapter 147. This is the third time I wrote a comment on the release of the book. It will be released at 0 in the evening. It may be a few minutes late due to system delays. It has been booming in recent days, and it will be the same in the future. As for the sale of the book, I won't write about it. I have earned a total of 5,000 yuan by writing Little Governor full-time for half a year. What kind of life is that? You should be able to imagine it. Let's talk about the book. The current data of the book The Prince is okay. Although it has not been published in Sanjiang, the support of book friends is still very strong. Currently, there are 14,000 collections and many rewards. When the book Little Governor was published, I thought that there would be 500 orders on the shelf, and I could make a living if I could get 10,000 a day. As a result, there were only 500 orders when it was released. Obviously, the goal was set too high. This book should keep the previous goal of 500 orders. Once the goal is set, it must be achieved. I started writing books in 2013. At that time, I read The Best Butler and then started writing by myself. The first book, The Best Blacksmith, was not written well. After finishing the book, I found that I was too young, so I went out to work for 5 years to increase my experience. I started writing again in March last year, and wrote the second fairy tale Qin Jianju Mei Ren. I wrote more than 1 million words, but it was not finished either. I didn't even sign a contract. After giving a perfect ending, I finished the book with 62 collections. Then I started the third book Xiaoao Xiaodudu, and finished the book with 200 average subscriptions. It can be said that I am moving forward step by step. Readers who have read it know that the heroines of these 3 books are basically the same. Strictly speaking, the story is changed and the heroines are rewritten twice. The reason why I didn't change to a new book, but wrote the heroines over and over again for nearly 4 million words, is naturally to write well and to make people remember the names in the book. As I said before, the purpose of my writing books has never changed since I typed the first word on the keyboard, just to make people remember the names of the characters in the book, because the characters remembered by people are alive. It has never changed for 7 years until people remember them. Although the performance of Little Governor of Carefree is not good, there are quite a lot of book friends who read it in the forum, which can be regarded as a part of book friends who remember it, so I started this new book. Strictly speaking, The Prince is Fierce is my second book, and I am also crossing the river by feeling the stones. Little Governor of Carefree began to control the rhythm, that is, the excitement, the beginning, development, turning point, etc. The skill is not enough, some plots are awkward, but as a beginner, I am generally satisfied, but the length is cut too much, the number of words is too small. The Prince is Fierce did not force the creation of excitement, the beginning, development, turning point, etc., but wrote it according to my own feelings, and it was as gentle as water and slowly told. As for what it will be like in the end, I will know after I finish the book. In general, it is also considered to be making progress. At this speed, I will slowly explore. After this book is finished, it should be considered as an entry. The next book is probably qualified to be published in Sanjiang. It will be released on July 1st. Book friends probably know the situation. The gods are fighting for supremacy. There are many great gods who are in the dog and LV5 everywhere. I am a small loser who joins in the fun. I have to charge in the opposite direction depending on the situation. But at least there are 14,000 collections. The big guys spend a dime to give a first order. It is possible to step on anyone. People still have to have some dreams. The first purpose of writing a book is that I want to write it. I can continue to write while I am alive. As long as I can barely make ends meet, I will finish it no matter what the results are. The previous books are proof that I can finish it even if I can't afford to eat, but it will definitely be difficult to write a long chapter. The Prince is Fierce is expected to be about 3 million words. I also want to write a book that doesn't need to be forced to cut the length for a living, so I still hope that everyone will give me a chance to finish the story. As for the update, everyone can rest assured. Book friends who have read the previous book know that on average, I have 10,000 words a day until the book is finished. I have never asked for leave or stopped updating for a day. I think my character can be guaranteed. The minimum update is 2 chapters. The number of additional chapters depends on the code. The policy for additional chapters is still 1 chapter for 10,000 rewards, 10 chapters for the leader and silver and gold. Forget it, don't dream. Because I owe a lot of debts and haven't paid them off yet, the policy for additional chapters will not change for the time being. I will wait until I pay off the debts in the next 1 or 2 months. Finally, thank you for the book friends who have accompanied me all the way. There were only 8 people in the group of Xiaojudu at the beginning, and now there are more than 1,000 people. Many book friends have watched me step by step to where I am now. But now is not the end, but just the beginning. I hope to go against the current in the trend of monk literature in the future, and no longer walk alone. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gongzi. Chapter 148. There are no people in the streets and alleys. Xiaoning. I'm coming. At dusk, soft footsteps sounded from outside the courtyard, and the door was pushed down, but it was tied and not pushed. Whispering, a moment later, on the low courtyard wall, a little girl in black wolf guard clothes climbed up with difficulty, jumped from the courtyard wall and fell into the courtyard. Where are the people? Zhu Manzi put his hands on his waist and looked around. The yard was empty, and there was no sign of the fox girl in white. A row of unopened broken tamaware was placed under the eaves, the small stove was turned off, and the pots and pans were neatly stacked in the small kitchen. Only the windows of the main house remained the same, with a few broken wooden boards nailed crookedly on the leaky windows. Zhu Manzi blinked his eyes, suddenly panicked, and started searching back and forth. He breathed a sigh of relief until he found the package, the sword, and the white fox fur spread out on the bed. I still have to leave. Zhu Manzi stood in front of the wooden bed holding his waist knife and sighed with some disappointment. However, the banquet was over and everyone knew that Kaname was leaving. At this time, apart from being a little reluctant to leave, there was nothing uncomfortable about it. At worst, when Mr. Su leaves Beijing safely and travels around the world together, he can just go to Changqing Temple to find her. With this idea in mind, Zhu Manzi took out a small bench from the house and placed it under the eaves. He sat alone, supporting his chin with his hand, waiting for the fox to come back and say goodbye to her. I was seriously in a daze, and for some reason I remembered the scene of sending Su Buling back yesterday. That hand. Zhu Manzi's face turned red, and she seemed to be feeling weird again. She didn't know what it felt like, but it was just weird. When she went back last night, she tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. She always felt that something was wrong, and her mind was filled with the scene on the carriage. Finally, I secretly rubbed it myself, but I didn't feel that way. Instead, I was so embarrassed. Fortunately, Mr. Su was unconscious yesterday. Zhu Manzi muttered for a while, put aside the messy thoughts in his mind, and pretended not to care. After waiting for about half an hour, a beautiful figure in white hurriedly fell down on the wall of the small courtyard. Zhu Manzi's eyes lit up, he sat up straight and was about to speak, but saw that Xiaoning, who had been calm in the past, was a little strange today. Wearing a weft hat, he walked hurriedly towards the house without paying any attention to her. Xiaoning. Ning Qingyi walked quickly with a frown on her face. When she suddenly heard a sound, she frightened and touched the sword on her waist. Unfortunately, she didn't bring a sword when she went out today. She came back to her senses and looked down. Zhu Manzi was sitting on the small bench, holding his chin and looking at her. Manzi, why are you here? Ning Qingyi's expression was very strange, and she seemed a little panicked. Zhu Manzi stood up and tilted his head to see Ning Qingyi's face under his hat. Ning Qingyi turned her head and looked aside. Xiaoning, what's wrong with you? It's nothing. I have to leave. If you have a chance in the future, come find me at Evergreen Temple. Ning Qingyi was so upset that she didn't want to stay in this place for a quarter of an hour. She walked into the house, picked up the package and sword, and prepared to leave. Zhu Manzi regarded Ning Qingyi as her iron sister. He was not happy to see her being so perfunctory. He picked up Hu Qiu and followed him out, saying anxiously, "Why are you leaving in such a hurry? I'll see you off. It's hard for you to leave the city without the wolf guard sign. You also forgot to take the fox fur." Ning Qingyi paused and looked at the large ball of snowy white fox fur in Zhu Manzi's arms, and naturally thought of that sanctimonious pervert again. I don't want it anymore, just take it. Ah. Zhu Manzi was stunned for a moment and looked down at the white fox fur. Although she was indeed covetous of the beautiful fox fur given by Su Buling, but Zhu Manzi raised a hand, made a gesture on his forehead, and then on Ning Qingyi's shoulder, pouting helplessly. Ning Qingyi blinked and then remembered that Zhu Manzi was not tall, so the white fox fur could only be used as a quilt when he took it back. Please help me return Su Buling. Zhu Manzi frowned slightly, lowered his head and smelled the fox fur, and said a little strangely, Xiaoning, you are a daughter, so be careful. You have been using the fox fur as a quilt for 2 months, and it is all covered with your fragrance. Ning Qingyi pursed her lips, raised her hand to take the white fox fur, and thought about throwing it into the well. Zhu Manzi was anxious, and quickly ran forward and grabbed Ning Qingyi. Why did you throw it away? It's so expensive. Just wear it. Mr. Su kindly gave it to you. Ning Qingyi is not extravagant and wasteful. She actually likes this white fox fur very much and is reluctant to wear it when going out. But today that pervert treated her. That's not right. Just draw a clear line with that pervert. Why are you angry with the clothes? Ning Qingyi was silent for a moment while holding the white fox fur, slowly suppressing the anger in her heart, thinking about it, and looked at Zhu Manzi. Manzi, you should be more careful in the capital from now on. Don't let men bully you. Some people know people but don't know their faces. Zhu Manzi blinked his big eyes and smiled. I know, as long as Mr. Su is here, no one dares to bully me. Ning Qingyi felt anxious, but it was difficult to say some things, so she could only say, no matter who you are, you should be careful. People in the world should be careful and don't trust others easily. I know, I know. Zhu Manzi nodded with a smile. You also have to be careful. Jianghu is very dangerous. Be smart and don't go straight ahead. Ning Qingyi had nothing to say. She glanced at the pistachio-like Zhu Manzi and felt a little reluctant to part with her. Although the world is big, you can only meet a few close friends in a lifetime. The sun sets in the west, and on the endless plain outside Chang'an City, a straight official road leads to the end of the sky. 2 fast horses ran out of the city gate, with swords hanging on their waists, one in black and one in white. The 2 girls stopped their horses at the welcoming platform outside the city. Ning Qingyi, wearing a curtain hat and snow-white fox fur, first looked at the majestic Chang'an behind her, then raised her hands and clasped her fists. See you soon, take good care of yourself. Zhu Manzi sat on the wolf guard horse, raised his hand and waved. Have a safe journey. I will go find you with Mr. Su. You can come alone. Ning Qingyi took a breath. She was not good at words and didn't say too much. She gave a gentle drive and sped away along the straight official road. Zhu Manzi sat on the horse, looked at a figure gradually receding under the setting sun, and chuckled. After his parents ran away from home, Zhu Manzi wandered around the world alone, looking around, and went to Beijing alone to join the Criminal Investigation Department, and then sneaked into the Tianzi camp. Although he found nothing in the end, thinking about it now, it was still a good deal. Yes, at least I met a lot of friends. Lu Hoer, Wang Dazhuang, Ning Qingyi, Su Buling. Everyone is a confidant, someone you can trust with your life. Now, she should be considered a serious charlatan. After watching the man and the horse disappear into the sky, Zhu Manzi turned his horse's head and headed towards Chang'an City. On the way, Zhu Manzi thought about the last time he and Su Buling rode a horse together, and then thought about last night. Well, from now on, I will be alone with Mr. Su. Zhu Manzi didn't know why he came up with such a weird idea, but he was still a little happy and chuckled. He hurriedly arrived outside the city gate, and was about to take out the wolf guard token to enter the city, when he suddenly saw a Taoist nun walking slowly on the roadside. The Taoist nun was wearing a common Kun Taoist robe, which was pitch black and spotless, with a white inner bottom. She also held a long sword in her hand, which was somewhat similar to Ning Qingyi's Shangchun, but it was different upon closer inspection. Most Jianghu people wear curtain hats and bamboo hats when they go out. Taoist nuns also wear curtain hats and their appearance is invisible, but their figure is really scary, with a narrow waist, wide hips, and straight and plump legs. Just looking at the back, she looks a bit out of this world. The fairy spirit. As he passed by, Zhu Manzi instinctively paid attention. It happened that the Taoist nun heard the sound of horse hooves and looked up as she stepped aside to avoid it. The breeze blew through the curtain of the curtain, and the face under the curtain suddenly appeared. The horses galloped past, and in the blink of an eye they were more than 10 feet away. Zhu Manzi turned back to look at the Taoist nun who was getting farther and farther away, with a somewhat inexplicable meaning in her big round eyes. It wasn't until passers-by blocked her sight that she turned around, remained silent for a long time, and whispered. "Why is there a woman who is prettier than Xiaoning? No, Xiaoning is young. When she is about the same age as that woman, she will be as good looking, still wrong, why?" Zhu Manzi's big eyes were filled with annoyance. He touched his cheek and began to complain about being so short that he couldn't even wear Su Buling's fox fur. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gongzi. Chapter 149. Dong. Dong. Morning bells rang through the streets of Chang'an, smoke rose from the streets, and the people began their busy day. Civil officials and military officers in court robes walked up to the majestic palace at the end of the Beishi Imperial Road. In the Suk Palace, Su Buling, who had vowed to Madame Lu not to enter the palace a few days ago, burned incense and bathed, tied his hair and changed his clothes, pretending to be recovering from a serious illness, and stepped into the carriage to the palace with a box of rouge and powder. Life was at stake, and it was no longer a matter of whether Madame Lu would kill him. As a man, he had to face what he had to face. The morning light sprinkled on the Zuk street that ran across Chang'an. The carriage swayed to the outside of the palace gate. The visiting card had been sent in advance, and Changal Palace sent people out to greet him, but the greeting was not very pleasing. The Queen Mother's exclusive sedan chair was gone, and several ugly maids stood outside the palace gate waiting. One of them was 5 feet tall and 5 feet in waist. She was holding a spring roll bought from the street and chewing it. No one knew how she was selected to enter the palace. Su Buling got off the carriage. Several maids in the laundry room looked at him with 3 parts of shyness and 7 parts of enthusiasm, as if they had not seen a man for decades. They did not know any rules. Su Buling, in line with his original intention of not judging people by appearance, still nodded with a smile, and then walked to the Queen Mother's bedroom deep in Changal Palace with the gift box. Hiding from the Queen Mother for many days, the side effects are visible to the naked eye. Changal Palace, which was originally quite popular, was dead silent. The maids didn't know where they went to hide. I didn't meet anyone from the palace gate to the bedroom. Only a few maids with strong possessiveness behind me were talking about compliments. The Queen Mother's bedroom was originally filled with flower pots, in which chrysanthemums that had not yet sprouted were planted. It was obvious that it had been damaged by someone. Several flower pots near the aisle were smashed. Later, they were probably too heavy to smash and were just thrown aside. The big cauldron in the garden was set up again. Chiao Yi stood beside it tremblingly, directing 2 young palace maids to light the fire. The fire was very strong, and the big cauldron was steaming. It was obvious that the water had been boiling for a while. There was a diving platform built at random next to the big cauldron. Xiaoting was tied to a pillar with his hands tied up. His handsome face was full of fear. He struggled hard and turned back to cry. "Aunt, Tinger is wrong. You can't cook it?" If you cook it, you won't have a nephew. I'll go find Su Buling and carry him back to you. Su Buling took a breath and covered his face with his sleeves and tried to walk over quickly. Unfortunately, Xiao Ting had sharp eyes and found the culprit jogging in the corridor. He immediately became excited and roared, "Su Buling, you finally showed up, why don't you go to hell? If I don't fight you today, I won't be surnamed Xiao." Su Buling coughed lightly. Even though he was a decisive person, he was a little embarrassed and raised his hand to the palace maid behind him. "What are you doing? Put Master Xiao down quickly, what if he gets hurt?" The huge palace maid behind him, the woman, speaking with a Sichuan accent, said. "Oh Prince's palace, we finally brought these firewood here, but the Queen Mother won't let us release them. If we do, I'll be boiled. Su Buling, why don't you save me? I'm your uncle, Madame Lu's brother-in-law. We'll meet again." Su Buling couldn't stand it anymore. When he passed by a broken flower pot, he kicked it with his toes, and a piece of broken porcelain flew out, crossing the wooden platform next to the cauldron with a sound of breaking wind, and the rope broke with a sound. Xiao Ting jumped off the platform in a hurry and ran out of the palace as if he had been pardoned. He didn't forget to turn around and shout, "Aunt, it was Su Buling who released me, not me. If you want to get angry, find Su Buling." He disappeared while he was talking, running faster than a rabbit. Su Buling was stunned, and suddenly regretted it. If he had known, he would have come a few days later. The main hall of the bedroom was closed, and there was silence inside and outside. When Su Buling walked to the door, the maid ran down carefully, fearing that the angry Queen Mother would vent her anger on others. Su Buling straightened his clothes and acted gentle and elegant, then raised his hand and knocked on the carved wooden door. Dong dong. In the magnificent hall, the Queen Mother, who was leaning on the soft couch and eating melon seeds, sat up after hearing the sound, kicked the tray of fruit shells under the soft couch, rubbed her beautiful eyes until her eye circles turned red. "Get in here." A trembling and delicate rebuke came from the main hall. Su Buling, who was outside the door, felt his scalp tingling, took a breath, smiled gently, and raised his hand to push open the door. Zaya. The magnificent main hall was very cold, with several vases falling to the ground and the furnishings in a mess, obviously after violent destruction. The Queen Mother sat on the soft couch at the side, her eyes seemed to want to kill, her eyes were red as if she had cried, her original gorgeous phoenix skirt was replaced by a white plain skirt, she was not wearing any makeup and her hair was disheveled, she looked like a poor woman who had suffered and lost everything, she was in a state of despair. A pair of golden scissors was in the Queen Mother's hand, the tip of the scissors was facing the door. Su Buling saw this scene, he felt a headache, and a faint sense of guilt. After a slight silence, he walked forward slowly and performed a proper junior salute. "Queen Mother." "You." The Queen Mother trembled slightly, gritted her teeth and stared at Su Buling for a long time, then trembled. "Close the door." Su Buling blinked, turned around and closed the door honestly, and then heard the sound of tap 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 dash footsteps rushing towards him. Su Buling sighed secretly, turned around and raised his hand, pretending to be scared. "Queen Dowager, calm down, Ling knows his mistake." The Queen Dowager's face was filled with grief and anger, and she pointed the scissors at Su Buling, her voice choking. You evil creature, do you know what absurd things you have done? I had no choice, please forgive me, Queen Dowager." "I had no choice?" "Ha ha." The Queen Dowager stared at Su Buling with tears in her eyes, her eyelashes trembling slightly. "I am the Queen Dowager, the mother of a country, if the late emperor knows." At this point, the Queen Dowager was filled with grief, raised her hand and stabbed the scissors at her neck, looking like she had lost her innocence and was going to die for her loyalty. Su Buling was anxious, and hurriedly pinched the golden scissors with 2 fingers, and apologized earnestly. "Queen Dowager, Ling knows his mistake, and he really had no choice. You also know what happened that night. The Queen Dowager tried to pull out the scissors, but she didn't know how to get them back, so she could only grit her teeth and say, "Why are you hiding from me? Why didn't you come to the palace when I asked you to?" Su Buling looked guilty. "I feel ashamed of the Queen Dowager, and I really have no face to come to your door." The Queen Dowager nodded gently, suppressed her anger and stretched out her white palm. "Okay, I will assume that you had no choice, give me back the belly band." Su Buling shook his head very simply. "No. The prince is very fierce." Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 150. Not giving. The Queen Mother was stunned for a moment, and then she became really angry. She stared at Su Buling with a red face. "You are so presumptuous. What do you want to do with my dirty clothes? Are you going to threaten me? You are so brave, I will die." Having said this, the Queen Mother remembered that there was no one around, and she was really afraid that Su Buling would be so bold that he would use her belly band to threaten her into doing something shameful. Lotus hidden carp can only be worn by the Empress Dowager. If Su Buletinling exposes it, her reputation will be completely ruined. With her status, I am afraid she will be scolded as a whore queen for thousands of years. Think about it, it doesn't make people shudder. Thinking of this, the Queen Mother regretted driving away the maids, and took the scissors to protect herself. Su Buling snatched the scissors away easily, raised his hand and saluted again, with a gentle voice. "Queen Mother, I'm here this time. Firstly, I want to apologize for what happened last time. Secondly, I have a question to ask the Queen Mother." The Queen Mother's eyes turned cold. "Don't try to bluff me. Please return the belly band to me first, otherwise there will be no need to discuss anything." Su Buling smiled peacefully. "I have something important to ask the Queen Mother today. I forgot it in the rush to enter the palace." The Queen Mother pursed her lips, and seeing that Su Buletinling looked like she wouldn't answer if she didn't answer, she endured it for a moment, and then snorted coldly. "Explain." Su Buling thought about it for a while. His face became a little more serious, and he said seriously, "Jiazi defeated Baiyu, and when the people's livelihood was restored after the war, most of the evil sects in Baiyu were wiped out, and the source of the dragon locking goo also came from Baiyu." Halfway through the words, the Queen Mother's expression changed. The anger disappeared and was replaced by seriousness. "What do you mean? You suspect that the court took the dragon lock goo at that time and then poisoned you now? It's a joke, I think you are a demon." Seeing that the Queen Mother had returned to her normal appearance, Su Buling carried the gift box and walked to the chair next to the soft couch to sit down. The Queen Mother stood there for a moment, because the dragon locking goo case was very involved and could lead to a competition among the 7 kings. Basically, whoever got involved would die. Although the Queen Mother was annoyed with Su Buling's rudeness, she did not dare to neglect this matter. She walked slowly to the soft couch and sat upright, saying coldly, "The locking dragon goo in your body came from Jianghu, not from the imperial court. Don't make random guesses and hurt our relationship." Su Buling's attitude was quite mild, but his words were very direct. "Originally, I thought that locking dragon goo came from Jianghu forces and had nothing to do with the imperial court. But some evidence was found a few days ago, which pointed in the wrong direction." "What evidence?" "I definitely can't tell the Queen Mother about this. If the evidence is wrong, wouldn't it ruin the relationship between my father, the Holy Emperor, and the Xiao family? I came to see the Queen Mother because I wanted the Queen Mother to help check and confirm the authenticity of the evidence." The Queen Mother frowned. She naturally knew what would happen if Su Buling proved that the poison was caused by the Emperor. Basically, only one of the Su family and the Song family can survive, and maybe the whole world will be dragged down. "What do you want to confirm?" Su Buling thought for a moment. "My grandfather Su Lai was in command when Baiyu was defeated." Only when everyone in the army is united can we conquer everything. If we had obtained the dragon lock goo and handed it over to the court at that time, my Su family would not have known about it. It's impossible for the imperial court to use dragon lock goo to attack me. The Queen Mother nodded. As long as you know, Emperor Xiaozong issued an imperial order to eradicate evil practices in the world. General Su is loyal and will never disobey orders and seek selfishness. Emperor Xiaozong is a wise king who will be remembered for generations, and it is impossible for him to hide the dragon lock goo secretly. Such dirty stuff. Su Buling agreed very much with this. It is precisely because of this that my father and I have never suspected this before. We only thought that locking dragon goo came from Jianghu warlocks, and even sent people to South Vietnam to search for clues. But a few days ago, I unexpectedly learned some news. Locking dragon goo came from a small force called 100 Insects Valley. Because it was hidden in the mountains, it was not affected by the passing army before Jiazi. After the war, when the people's livelihood was restored, they led the troops to wipe out and slaughter all the people. The 100 Insect Valley was also burned to the ground, and the locking dragon goo was lost. Yeah, what's the problem? Su Buling frowned slightly. At that time, the person in charge of restoring people's livelihood after the war and clearing out the banditry in the upper reaches was military advisor Xiao Ying, the grandfather of the Queen Mother, and it was Mr. Xiao who led the troops to clear out the 100 Insect Valley. The Queen Mother was stunned for a moment, and then she became angry and said in a cold voice, "Do you suspect that the Xiao family secretly hid the locking dragon goo to poison you?" You. Su Buling raised his hand. I have no doubts about the Huainan Xiao family. The Xiao family and my Su family do not interfere with each other. It would be harmful to me but not beneficial at all. Even if it is the intention of the imperial court, it is impossible to order the Xiao family to attack me take action. This matter of killing the descendants of meritorious deeds, the three families of Xiao, Lu, and Su stood together and took action against the Su family, and sooner or later they aimed their swords at the Xiao family. The Queen Mother nodded. It's good that you know. This matter is very involved, and it is impossible for our Xiao family to be involved. Su Buling sighed, but judging from the current situation, the Xiao family is most suspected of hiding the dragon lock goo. Jiazi went to defeat Baiyu, and the whole army obeyed my grandfather's orders. He was able to hide everything in the army. The only people who secretly hide the locked dragon goo are a few officials from wealthy families, because my grandfather can't control these people, and Mr. Xiao's qualifications are even higher than my grandfather's. The Queen Mother was silent for a moment, thinking carefully for a moment. My Xiao family does have this ability, but that was 60 years ago. Even if my grandfather had exhausted all his plans, he would not have been able to attack you after 60 years. At that time, General Su was still alone. All in one, not even a wife. Su Buling shook his head. Although Mr. Xiao has a plan, he doesn't necessarily have to plot against anyone by hiding the dragon locking goo. The Huainan Xiao family is good at Kimanbagua and is interested in all kinds of strange objects. With the Xiao family's usual style, it is normal for them to be reluctant to lose such a rare and strange thing as the dragon locking goo and preserve it. The Queen Mother must know more about how many things that have been lost in history are hidden by the Huainan Xiao family than I do. The Queen Mother blinked her eyes and slowly leaned back on the soft couch. After thinking carefully for a long time, she still shook her head. My Xiao family does collect some strange objects, but I grew up in Huainan and have been to the treasury several times. They are all things for appreciation. I have never heard of the dragon locking goo. If there is one, it is impossible to poison you. The Queen Mother should know how powerful the dragon locking goo is. Life is not good. It's been a long time, just think that I'm desperate. It's very likely that the dragon locking goo came from the Xiao family, but the Xiao family couldn't poison me. The only possibility is that something went wrong in the middle and caused the dragon locking goo to change hands. I'm afraid only Prime Minister Xiao knows about this matter, please ask the Queen Mother for me. The Queen Mother pursed her lips, how can I ask about this, anyway, the poison can't be from my Xiao family, it has nothing to do with us. Su Buling sighed, put the gift box next to the Queen Mother, and said softly. The knife is on my neck, I have been forced into a desperate situation, and the last time was indeed an accident. In order to investigate the dragon locking goo, the palace risked its life, and the Xiao family did the same. If I die in the Xiao family's house, things will be even more troublesome. You dash. This is considered a threat. The Queen Mother took a breath and looked at Su Buling a few times, but she had nothing to say. After all, Su Buling was really desperate, and it was not surprising for a dying person to do anything, but the belly band was still in his hands. I'll ask for you, don't rush to do stupid things. Thank you, Queen Mother. Remember to bring the belly band with you next time you enter the palace. Hee hee.